They thought I was finished. A 68-year-old man who didn't know how to use the self-checkout at Sobeys, who still called it the computer when he meant the laptop, who sat in the same armchair every evening with a cup of red rose tea and didn't say much. They looked at me the way you look at a lamp that's been in the corner so long you stop noticing it's there. After my wife died, they thought they could just walk in and start dividing things up. They were wrong. But before I tell you what happened, what I found, what I did, and what it cost every single one of them, I need you to understand who my wife was, because I didn't. Not fully, not until it was too late to tell her. Her name was Beverly. 51 years we were married. She grew up in Sudbury, daughter of a steelworker and a woman who could stretch a chicken 3 different ways across a week. Beverly never forgot where she came from. Even when we moved to Guelph, even after I started doing well enough at the plant that we could afford little extras here and there, she kept her habits. She clipped coupons from the flyer. She bought the store brand cereal. She turned off lights when she left a room with a kind of righteous consistency that never softened, not in 50 years. I used to tease her about it. "Bev," I'd say, "we're not in 1974 anymore." She'd give me that look, not unkind, just patient, and say, "Wes, the money you don't spend is the money you keep." I thought I knew what she meant. I didn't. Every Thursday morning, for as long as I can remember, Beverly would get dressed, pick up her purse, the same brown leather purse for 20 years, restitched twice by a cobbler on Woolwich Street, and drive to the TD branch on Stone Road. Sometimes she'd be gone an hour. Sometimes she'd be gone an hour. Sometimes chew. I never asked what she was doing. I assumed it was the regular business of a household. Deposits, transfers, paying a bill she didn't trust the internet to handle. Beverly didn't explain herself much, and I didn't push. That was the shape of us. I handled the furnace and the car and the gutters. She handled everything else. When she died, a Tuesday morning in October, a heart attack that came without any warning, without any drama, just Beverly sitting at the kitchen table not drinking her coffee anymore. I thought the hardest part would be the grief. I was wrong about that too. She'd been gone 11 days when our son showed up. I want to be careful here because he is still my son, and I do still love him, somewhere deep under everything that happened. But I have to tell the truth about what he did. He drove up from Hamilton with his wife, Pauline, and the two of them walked into my house with the energy of people who had somewhere to be. Pauline had a legal pad. I remember thinking that was strange. Who brings a legal pad to a condolence visit? They sat down in the living room, and my son, I'll call him my son because that's what he is, whatever else he became that week, he cleared his throat and said Beverly had mentioned, apparently, that the house might need to come into both names at some point. For tax purposes, he said. For simplicity. I looked at him. "Your mother's been gone 11 days, I said. Pauline clicked her pen. 2 days later, my daughter arrived from Bury. I was glad to see her at first. She brought food, a lasagna, a container of soup, and she hugged me for a long time, and I thought, all right, this is what family does. Then, after supper, she asked if I'd given any thought to the Weston Gardens place over on Edinburgh. She'd driven past it. It looked lovely, very modern. Did I know they had a pool? A retirement home. My daughter was suggesting a retirement home while her mother was still technically in the process of being cremated. I said I was fine. She said she just wanted me to be comfortable. Pauline's legal pad reappeared at breakfast the next morning. I want to tell you that I handled all of this with grace and composure. I didn't. I went quiet in that particular way I have. Beverly always said I went quiet the way the sky goes quiet before a hailstorm, and I let them talk. My son explained things. Pauline organized things. My daughter made phone calls from the guest room with the door half closed. I sat in my armchair with my tea, and I let it happen around me because I didn't have the vocabulary yet for what I was watching. They thought my silence was agreement. It wasn't. It was confusion. I was 68 years old. I had just lost the person I'd shared every day with for 51 years, and my children were in my house with a legal pad and a brochure for a retirement community. And I could not yet make those two facts sit next to each other in a way that made sense. The Thursday after Beverly died, I don't know why, I got up and got dressed and drove to the TD on Stone Road. I don't know what I was looking for. Routine, maybe. The shape of her day. I sat in the parking lot for about 20 minutes and then I drove home. That's when I found the envelope. It was on the floor near the front door, partially under the mat. It must have come through the mail slot and slid there. Standard white envelope, Beverly's name on the front, return address from a law office on McDonnell Street downtown. I almost set it aside with the sympathy cards. Something made me open it. It was a letter from a lawyer named Mr. Ashworth. It referred to Beverly as his client. It expressed condolences, and it noted, in the careful language of legal correspondence, that there were matters pertaining to the estate which required my attention at my earliest convenience, and that I should call to arrange an appointment. I sat down on the bench in the front hall, the wooden one Beverly had bought at a garage sale in Fergus, the one she'd repainted twice, and I read the letter 3 more times. Beverly had a lawyer. Beverly had an estate lawyer, apparently, and I did not know about it. I called the next morning. Mr. Ashworth was a quiet man, around 50, with an office full of books that looked like they'd actually been read. He shook my hand, offered coffee, and then he laid a folder on the desk between us and said, "Mr. Calloway, your wife was a remarkably organized woman." That is one of the most significant understatements I have ever heard. Beverly had been coming to this office, or one like it, for over 2 decades. She had, over the course of our marriage, quietly and methodically built something. Not out of my income. She had never touched the household accounts beyond what was needed for groceries and utilities and the ordinary costs of life. She had built it out of her own work. 3 days a week, for almost 30 years, Beverly had been doing bookkeeping for small businesses out of a home office I had always assumed was just where she went to manage our bills. She'd never mentioned clients. She'd never mentioned invoices. When I worked long hours at the plant, she was working too, in the room at the end of the hall, building something I didn't know existed. The number Mr. Ashworth showed me, I won't say it here, but I will say it had more digits than I expected, and that it was held in a family trust, properly structured, with me named as sole beneficiary and trustee. I drove home in a state that I can only describe as vertical, like the world had tilted 90 degrees and I was somehow still walking on it. My son was in the kitchen when I got back. Pauline was on her laptop. My daughter was on the phone. They looked up when I came in, assessed me briefly, and went back to what they were doing. I put my coat on the hook and went upstairs and sat on the edge of the bed Beverly and I had shared for 30 years, and I talked to her, out loud. I told her I had found it. I told her I was furious with her for not telling me, and that I understood why she hadn't, and that I missed her so much I didn't know how to be in a room anymore. I cried for a while. Then I went back downstairs. My son had, in my absence, gotten into my filing cabinet. He said he was just looking for the mortgage documents, to understand what the estate process would look like, for simplicity. I stood in the doorway of my own office and watched my son rifle through 30 years of my files, and I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger, clarity. I called Mr. Ashworth's office the next morning and made another appointment. What Beverly had set up was more elegant than anything I could have designed. The family trust was structured so that the house, Our house, the one we'd bought in 1989, the one my children had grown up in, was held as an asset of the trust, of which I was the sole trustee. My son's name was not on it. My daughter's name was not on it. There was no ambiguity, no gray area, no room for a legal pad. Beverly had also left a letter, not for me. She'd left one for me too, which I will not share because it belongs to me, but a separate letter, addressed to both children together, which Mr. Chair Ashworth read aloud in his office while my son and Pauline and my daughter sat in chairs that seemed suddenly less comfortable than they had 5 minutes before. The letter was classic Beverly. No raised voice, no accusations, just precise, plain language, the kind she probably used in 30 years of business correspondence. She wrote that she loved them. She wrote that she had worked hard and quietly for a long time and that the results of that work were intended to support their father in his remaining years, and that she expected them to behave accordingly. She wrote that she had watched the way things went in families when money was involved, and she had taken steps to make sure that it would not go that way in ours. She wrote that if they had questions, Mr. Ashworth would answer them. She did not write that she was disappointed. She didn't have to. Pauline's legal pad was not present at this meeting, I noticed. The drive home from that appointment was the first time since Beverly died that I felt like myself. Not happy. I wasn't happy. I had just lost the person I loved most in the world, but myself. Upright, like the world had tilted back. My son barely spoke for the rest of the day. Pauline made dinner, which I'll give her credit for, a decent pasta, though she slightly overcooked the penne. My daughter sat across from me at the table we'd all shared for 30 years of holidays and birthdays, and she looked at me like she was trying to remember who I was. I let her look. I poured myself a small glass of the Niagara Riesling Beverly had liked, and I sat at the head of my own table and I ate. The subject of Weston Gardens was not raised again. They left on Sunday. My son hugged me at the door and held on a little longer than usual. I don't know what that meant, and I didn't ask. My daughter cried, which I think was genuine, and I told her she could call any time, and I meant it. Pauline shook my hand. I thanked her for the pasta. When their car turned off the street, I stood in the doorway for a moment in the October cold, and I thought about Beverly, about 30 years of Thursday mornings, about a brown leather purse restitched twice, about a woman who grew up learning to make things last and who turned that instinct, quietly and without any announcement, into something that would outlast her in the most practical way possible. She knew what they were. She'd seen it coming, maybe years before I had. And she had prepared, the way she always prepared, not with confrontation, not with drama, but with patience, and ledgers and a very good lawyer. I went back inside. I turned on the lamp by the armchair, put the kettle on, and found the letter she'd left for me. I'd read it 4 times already. I read it again. At the bottom, in her handwriting, the same handwriting that had been on grocery lists and birthday cards and the note she'd left on my dashboard the morning of our first anniversary 30 years ago, she'd written, "You were never the lamp in the corner, Wes. You were the whole house. I just wanted to make sure it was yours." I kept the light on for a long time that night. I still think about the Thursday mornings, 30 years of them, and I never once asked a real question. I assumed I knew the shape of our life together, and I was so convinced of that shape that I stopped looking at it carefully. That's the thing about living alongside someone for 51 years. You start reading from memory instead of from the page in front of you. Beverly knew things I didn't, not because she was secretive by nature, but because she was paying attention in ways I wasn't. She watched how money moved through families after someone died. She watched what happened to people who left things vague, who assumed goodwill would be enough, who trusted that love would organize itself without any help. She understood that love is real and also that love, on its own, doesn't hold up in a room with a legal pad and an inheritance. She was right about that. What she did took a particular kind of character, not just the patience to build quietly for 30 years without recognition or acknowledgement, though that alone is something I don't think I could have done. It took the honesty to look at her own family clearly, including our children, and see what they were capable of under pressure, and to prepare accordingly without bitterness. She didn't write that letter to punish anyone. She wrote it because she believed in consequences. She believed that the shape of how you treat people should have a shape in return. That's not cruelty. That's just paying attention to how things actually work. I think about my son standing in my office going through my files. I think about my daughter's voice when she mentioned the retirement home, the particular careful tone of someone who has already decided and is now managing the announcement. I don't think they are bad people. I think they stopped being curious about who I was a long time ago. They looked at me and saw a category: aging father, uncertain future, asset to be administered, and they stopped looking after that. Beverly had seen it coming. I hadn't, or maybe I had and hadn't wanted to name it. There's something clarifying about being underestimated. Not pleasant, but clarifying. When Pauline clicked her pen in my living room 11 days after Beverly died, something in me that had been soft for a long time went quiet and firm, not angry, just decided. And when Mr. Ashworth opened that folder and I understood what Beverly had built and what she had named me and what it meant, I felt something I didn't expect. Not triumph, steadiness, like a floor under my feet that had always been there, and I was only now noticing. I'm 68 years old, and I have learned, later than I should have, that the most important thing you can do for the people you love is to be clear, not loud, not aggressive. Clear. Beverly was the clearest person I have ever known. She didn't make speeches, she made plans. She didn't argue. She documented, and when the moment came, she wasn't there to see it, but she had arranged it so carefully that she didn't need to be. I keep the light on in the evenings now. I drink my tea and I sit in the armchair, and sometimes I talk to her, still the way you keep a habit long after its original purpose has changed. I tell her she was right. About most things. About the important things. I think she knew that too.